So there's a critical distinction in terms of getting stronger versus trying to get muscles to be larger, hypertrophy per se, and it has to do with how much you isolate those muscles. There are three major stimuli for changing the way that muscle works and making muscles stronger, larger, or better in some way. And those are stress, tension, and damage. Those three things don't necessarily all have to be present, but stress of some kind has to exist. Something has to be different in the way that the nerve communicates with the muscle and the way that the muscle contracts or performs that makes the muscle need to change. Something needs to happen. Certain chemicals need to be present. Certain processes need to happen, or else a tissue simply won't change itself. But if those processes and events do happen, then the tissue has essentially no option except but to change. So the way to think about muscle growth and the way to think about muscles getting stronger is that those balloons get bigger and the muscle gets thicker. Now, the question then should be, as always, how does that happen? I mean, the muscle doesn't really know anything about what's happening in the outside world. The way it happens is the neuron has to tell the muscle to get stronger. And it does that through what we call a signaling cascade. It talks to the muscle in terms of chemicals. It doesn't whisper to it or shout at it, hey, get bigger. What it does, it releases certain chemicals that within the muscle, there are certain chemicals released that make those balloons, as I'm referring to them, the myosin, get thicker. So there's a critical distinction in terms of getting stronger versus trying to get muscles to be larger, hypertrophy per se, and it has to do with how much you isolate those muscles. Muscle isolation is not a natural phenomenon. It's not something that we normally do. When we walk, we don't think, okay, right calf contract, left calf contract. No, you just generate those rhythmic movements. And of course, there's no reason for them to get stronger or larger in response to those movements. Let's say you were to do a kind of strange experiment of attaching 30-pound weights to your ankles, and you were to do those movements. Well, if you weren't specifically contracting your calves in each step, there's no reason for the calves to take on the bulk of the work, and you would distribute that work across your hip flexors and other aspects of your musculature. Your whole nervous system seeks to gain efficiency. It seeks to spread out the effort. So you can nest this as a principle for yourself, which is if you want to get stronger, it's really about moving progressively greater loads or increasing the amount of weight that you move. Whereas if you're specifically interested in generating hypertrophy, it's all about trying to generate those really hard, almost painful, localized contractions of muscle. Now, of course, how much weight you use in order to generate those contractions will also impact hypertrophy. But I think most people don't really understand the mind-muscle connection. It sounds like a great thing, but it's actually one of the things you want to avoid if your goal is simply to become more supple or to become stronger. You want to do the movements properly and safely, of course, but it's the opposite of hypertrophy, where with hypertrophy, you're really trying to make that particular muscle, sometimes two muscles, do the majority, if not all the work. Whereas in moving force loads, in trying to generate activity of any kind, like lifting a bar or doing a chin-up or something, those so-called compound movements that involve a lot of muscle groups, if your goal is to be better at those, you want to avoid isolating any one particular muscle.